Welcome. Welcome everyone to the Church of Perpetual Life. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Neil Vandry and I'm your officiator this evening. Come on in and get a seat. We'd like to also welcome everyone who's joining us through the live stream tonight as well. I'd like to, as you know, there's a film crew filming tonight, so if you don't want to be filmed, maybe sit in this back left area over here. And I'd like to also let you know that our next event will be October the 21st. October 21st, we're going to be, November. November 21st, we've got Duncan Ross. Duncan, thank you for doing that. So Duncan Ross is going to be speaking on exosomes. November 21st, that's a Thursday evening. You want to be here for that. This is our first official service in the season, where our season goes from October through June. And this is the first beginning of our official season of festivities. After the service, you're welcome to join us downstairs. We have a 5-star chef. He's making dinner for us tonight. So you're welcome to join us downstairs. Last July, we had our first Cryonics Symposium International, and we'll keep you posted on our next one. We also have informal gatherings in the summertime, in August and September, where we have a movie night, or we have a potluck, and so we wish you that you'll be able to join us at those events as well. Last July, we had our first Cryonics Symposium International, and we'll keep you posted on our next one. We also have informal gatherings in the summertime, in August and September. At our regular services, we usually have guest speakers that teach scientific rationality along with the Creator's plan that humanity evolved to achieve markedly extended, healthy lifespans. We follow the prophet's Arthur C. Clarke, who said, "The limits of the possible can only be defined by going beyond them into the impossible," and Nikolai Fedorov's philosophy of the common task for humanity. Nikolai Fedorov believed, as we do here, that we should divert human energies from wars and dissension toward solving things like floods and death itself, where we can reverse aging. I'd like to go over the Perpetual Life Creed that we have, and if you'll read along with me, we believe that all of life is sacred and that we have been given this one life to make unlimited. We believe in our Creator's divine plan for all of humanity to have infinite lifespans in perfect health and eternal joy, rendering death to be optional. By following our gospel, we achieve eternal life, creating a heaven here on earth. We follow Nikolai Fedorov's, who taught that the transcendence of the Creator will only be solved when humanity, in our unified efforts, become the instrument of universal resurrection. Resuscitation, when the divine word becomes our divine action. We follow Arthur C. Clarke, who said, "The only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible." And so we enter each day energized in spirit and empowered by the words of our prophets to live in joy, serving our Creator and all of humankind forever and ever. We have a lending library here at Perpetual Life. If you'd like to borrow one of our books, in the outer sanctuary here, you'll find it there. Go ahead and check out a book, borrow it for the month, and bring it back next month. All right. So who's here for the very first time? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 of you. Wow. I want to welcome you. And, you know, as I mentioned, yes, a round of applause for our first-timers. Yes. So glad that you are here, and those of you who are inviting your friends, keep doing that. Bring them again next month, November 21st, when we have an event on exosomes by Duncan Ross. It's going to be great to have you. Now what I'd like to do is bring up the founder of Perpetual Life, and he's got a great presentation he brought back with him from the RAAD Festival. Let's welcome the founder of Perpetual Life, Mr. Bill Faloon.
Group, I cannot express in words what happened in Las Vegas, October 3rd through October 6th, 2019. We had, I guess, record attendance, but that wasn't what was so spectacular. It was the event itself that went on, where we launched the first human trial aimed at inducing statistically significant and meaningful biological age reversal within 12 months. Before I get to the RAADfest presentation, I just want to update you with some recent findings. And this was the biggest challenge I had, by the way, in putting on my RAADfest presentation. I had over 500 slides of significant interest to the group, and I had to whittle that down to about 200, and then rush through them rather quickly during my RAADfest keynote talk, which essentially introduced everything that was going on. But what I was not able to talk about at RAADfest is what you're looking at the screen right now. This study was done at the Max Planck Institute and also the University College London. This study involved fruit flies, which are a model of aging. And typically, if you give fruit flies something that slows aging, they'll live 5 to 20% longer. Well, they did a triple drug combination, rapamycin, a dasatinib analog, and low-dose lithium. And they were able to increase the lifespan by 48%. This is dynamic. This is something that is not something they're used to observing, so it made some international headlines, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Rapamycin, lithium, and the dasatinib analog increased lifespan 48%. And it makes sense because we understand how these compounds work in the body to slow and potentially reverse aging. And these were the charts from the published study showing the extension of lifespan, 48%, and the fact that if they see 5 to 20%, they're kind of happy about that. And the University College London, UCA, it was really UCL that is, it's really interesting. They're doing pioneering work. They're looking to disrupt the world the way this church was founded in 2013, to open people's eyes up to the fact that we can do something about biological aging. And within that UCL group is an Institute for Healthy Aging. And I was surprised to see one of the founders, an individual named Alex Comfort, and he's one of the early pioneers who espoused immortality, who espoused the notion of people living real long periods of time without suffering the degenerative afflictions of aging. And what was presented at RAADfest by Dr. Gregory Fahey, someone who I've worked with for the last 35 years. It's Greg Fahey's research back in the 1980s that resulted in coenzyme Q10 becoming available to Americans. Well, Dr. Fahey did a study in conjunction with UCLA and Stanford in which they used growth hormone, DHEA, and metformin. 3 drugs, and they did that in a group of men, and they were able to reverse aging biomarkers by 2.5 years. This made international headlines right around the time RAADfest was occurring. And the media picked up on the fact that for the first time, perhaps in history, a triple drug combination given to older men reversed their aging, improved their immune function, reversed markers of cancer in the prostate gland, and would enable these people theoretically to live a lot longer. And these are readily available compounds that we can get our hands on right now. Nothing new has to be discovered. What they are looking into now is an affordable way to give low-dose growth hormone over a 1-year period. That's all they needed to do to induce this systemic regeneration. And this goes along the path of our stair-step approach to biological age control. We want to activate AMPK, we want to purge our body of senescent cells, restore youthful NAD levels, clear out the inside of our cells that get all clogged up with cellular debris through autophagy, and then biologics, exosomes, stem cells, umbilical stem cells, all types of biologics that we feel will have meaningful age reversal benefits, and that's based on a lot of research we're doing right now. So the Interdisciplinary Stem Cell Institute in Miami gets a $25 million donation. This is fantastic news. This is right after RAADfest. Someone wrote a check to enhance stem cell research in a way to make it clinically available to us a lot sooner. So I'm going to go over my RAADfest talk right now to this group, and I'll go through it a little bit slower because I was really crushed for time out there in Las Vegas. We had so many speakers, we had to give everyone essentially a restriction on how much time they had to talk. And I opened up with going back in time 10 years ago, literally November 2009, my group put together a seminar where people could attend a lecture and not really lecture as much as to interact, to figure out a way to identify one mechanism, one aging mechanism that we could thwart, that we could circumvent, so that we could perhaps live just a little bit longer. That's all we were trying to do back in 2009 at the Manhattan Beach Longevity Summit. So we put together a nice logo called Nuke Aging. We used the term Manhattan Beach Project to indicate the sense of urgency that we had back there to find just one way to intervene into biological aging. And hey, we were aging to death at that point, as we are right now, but there was nothing we could do just 10 years ago to reverse it. Absolutely nothing. So we got this group together mainly to pool our mental resources, our knowledge base. What could we do? And it turned out to be absolutely nothing. 10 years ago, nothing could be done that we could validate to reverse biological aging. Absolutely nothing. These are some of the foremost experts in the world that we put together. Nothing to reverse aging. It truly was a very desperate period of time. Move forward just 1 decade, and you're seeing the covers of prestigious scientific publications talking about finding a cure for biological aging. And right in the newsstands now, you'll see some editions of Time magazine talking about the fact that aging is no longer a dreadful inevitability. They're talking about in this Time magazine what you've learned in this church since year 2013 about intervening in a way that we can turn back time, that we can potentially grow biologically younger. And you look at the number of interventions that we have today, and these are interventions that our various charities and other organizations are looking into to rejuvenate older people. Bear in mind, we didn't have anything 10 years ago, and we've got at least 10 to 12 that we're actively investigating now. And the concept of human immortality, no longer science fiction. It's getting written up in published scientific journals about the prospect of humans living for indefinite periods of time. When we started this church in 2013, you didn't see this. You didn't see this even 2 or 3 years ago, but the media is picking up on the science indicating that we are going to live a lot longer because we are cheating biological aging. We're intervening. We're taking steps to not let nature take its course. So you look 10 years ago, 2009, aging, nothing could be done to reverse it. Absolutely nothing that could be identified with a group of people we put together for a 3-day weekend summit and move forward to where we are today. It's like, which one? And the bottom line is they seem to all work together. And that's why we have our stair-step approach. We want to use multiple interventions to maybe live 48% longer the way the fruit flies did. In that first slide I showed you, they used rapamycin, they used lithium, and they used a dasatinib analog that works the same way, and that enabled those flies to live a lot longer. There are longevity conferences going on around the world virtually every other weekend. And RAADfest is now listed as one of the top 30 longevity conferences to attend. That's real good news, and it explains why you can't really fill up a room with a whole lot of people nowadays because there's so many other good events to go to. And younger people are not ignoring the fact that they're growing old. They've got some problems. Laura Deming, she was 23 when she put together an investment fund and raised $37 million to invest in a whole lot of different companies that were seeking a way to solve the problem of aging. And this individual, he left Pepsi to go to work for the Life Biosciences company. They've raised $75 million to find a way to reverse aging in people. And Alex Zavaronikov, this is an individual some of our groups have supported early on, and he has now developed a company that recently raised $37 million, and he just got a contract with some Chinese investors for a $200 million research project to identify drugs and other compounds that could enable people to live a lot longer, a lot healthier. And it's just amazing, by putting a little bit of money in now, what can happen. And Jim Mellon, he's the ultimate fundraiser. He's raised $165 million to enable all of us in this room to live to be at least 150 years of age. It's absolutely incredible. Wall Street Journal talking about the fact that since 1995, and that wasn't very long ago, since 1995, the number of Americans living to age 100 and older has doubled. I mean, a 2.5-fold increase from just 1980. 1980 really wasn't that long ago when you think about it. The projection is that even without any of the interventions that we're going to talk about tonight, there will be a nearly 5-fold increase in the numbers of Americans who reach age 100 and above. 5-fold increase. It's amazing. But here's what's also something we should pay attention to. The advances in human longevity between 1980 and 2000, they were significant, but it dropped off after 2000 as it relates to the relative change of the number of Americans reaching age 100. And we attribute the obesity epidemic. These maps, I've shown them in this church before, but you go back to 1994, there was not a lot of obesity and type 2 diabetes. And starting in 2000, people started getting heavier. And as a result, it became more diabetic, more metabolic syndrome. And by 2015, a plague, like a viral plague sweeping the United States of metabolic diseases related to obesity and diabetes, just poor lifestyle choices. So what's going on in this country is all this good technology that we're bringing into play is being thwarted because people are overeating and under-exercising. This data came out just a couple months ago. We've always known obese people have a higher cancer risk. This data showed the risk of cancer in obese people is far higher than what was previously estimated. Very scary. And if you're concerned about dementia, well, if you have a big belly, unfortunately, your risk of dementia is 3.5 times greater. So we want to do whatever we can to reduce our risk of diseases related to the food that we eat. Of course, an easy way is to do what I'm doing, intermittent fasting and just undereating in general. Some people are challenged to do that. Some good news. A rapamycin clinical trial that we helped to fund. This is the 5 milligram a week dose of rapamycin. We were able to enroll people through our age reversal network, and we didn't see any serious side effects, which is very good. And we had, unfortunately, a problem that you're reading about in the news today and also occurred last year. California wildfires. The people who were in the study mainly lived where there was a lot of stress and smoke inhalation, and they unfortunately did not derive the benefits that we hoped for. But what we were able to observe, and people taking 5 milligrams of rapamycin just once a week, were significant reductions in visceral fat mass. And in the non-smoke affected areas, there were some indicators of age reversal going on that helps confirm what rapamycin does in virtually every species ever tested, and that is it lets the animals live a lot longer. But the reduction in visceral fat in people can be very significant. So we know rapamycin, well tolerated, but if you have a lot of stress in your life and you're breathing a lot of smoke, well, you're going to offset most of the regenerative benefits. Again, our stair-step approach to biological age control so that you can potentially live long enough to benefit from CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology that we feel is going to make a huge, huge difference in our ability to combat aging and its degenerative illnesses. Now, a lot of people, they're concerned that they're going to grow older and they're not going to feel so good. They're going to have a lot of health problems. Well, it turns out that there's a real big difference depending on where you live as to when you start feeling old. If you live in Papua New Guinea and you're 46, you've got the age-related health problems of a 65-year-old. On the other hand, Japan, you don't start feeling 65 until you're 76 years of age. That's a 30-year gap. And it really reveals we have a lot of control over how long we're going to live in a good state of health. And the United States, well, we are ranked 54th on that list between Algeria and Iran. And it really shows you how people in this country are not doing what they should be to take care of themselves. But the good news is we do have control over this. I say good news because this chart of the United States shows stroke incidences. The deep purple area, very high rates of stroke. There's also very high rates of obesity, tobacco smoking, eating very poor diets, a low socioeconomic status, so they don't get good medical care. And those areas of the country have very high risks of stroke. But even if you live in those areas, you can still take care of yourself. You can behave yourself in a way that you won't have these problems. So we've got this surging numbers of Americans living to age 100 and above, but to get there, you typically have to take care of yourself unless you happen to be a super centenarian. They have genes that enable them to do anything they want, and they just don't get old until they get well over 100. But most of us are not in that category. And the fantastic news is life expectancy, because it is increasing, people in the investment community are opening their eyes, and they're talking about the most exciting area to make money at this point is to delay human death. Now, these are terms that I've talked about my whole life. I've never really seen them talked about in writing as an investment opportunity. Death delaying technologies. That's what people in the investment community are looking at, and we're seeing that with all these different scientists and others getting some really big money. And if you wonder why this is all happening, why is there so much interest all of a sudden? Well, it's the peer-reviewed published data. Everything we've talked about at this church and before as it relates to what we can do to slow down and reverse aging, it's being published in respected scientific journals. And as a result of these publications, the scientific community is merging with business venture capitalists. They're putting big money into it. Problem is, most of us in this room don't have time to wait for conventional FDA approval processes to occur. We need to push this technology forward for ourselves so that we can benefit from it. And good news out of Harvard, a DNA switch to control whole body regeneration has been discovered. This is fantastic. We want to be around to take advantage of this when this technology becomes available at our doctor's office. And we've talked a lot about CRISPR-Cas9. The Salk Institute did some research where they used a gene editing therapy to purge senescent cells from old mice. And what they were able to see was spectacular. These are progeroid mice. They were genetically programmed to grow old real fast. And by removing the senescent cells using CRISPR-Cas9 technology, they were able to systemically rejuvenate these older animals, and they lived about 25% longer. Just one intervention to engage and thwart one pathological aging mechanism, which is the accumulation of senescent cells. Now, this church has gotten a lot of publicity. We had a nice write-up in Popular Science magazine in 2018, and that resulted in a bunch of other media sources coming in, interviewing me, coming to the church, filming like they're doing tonight all the way from the United Kingdom. They're here filming this to show it to a lot of people in England to see what Americans are doing. And well, MIT, you can't get much more prestigious than that. Their issue just last month proclaims old age is over. And they interviewed me and a number of other scientists, and they poked fun at it, which I'm used to. That's okay. But they mentioned RAADfest. They mentioned RAADfest and the fact that I was going to be making a major announcement at RAADfest. And that announcement was made. I'm going to tell you about it real soon. Absolutely huge. Again, they like to poke fun at the fact is, do you really want to live to be a long, healthy lifespan human being? Do you really want human immortality? They keep asking those questions. It's an obvious answer. The church continues, as I said, to garner publicity. Galileo, the most popular documentary series in German-speaking Europe. They were here last year doing a lot of filming. We got a lot of nice compliments from that. A lot of people from Germany calling me. Now, our brains, they age. And even if we maintain young bodies, what's the big deal if we're going to have an aged brain? Well, the microglial cells, they support our neurons. Without microglial cells, the garbage that accumulates around our neurons results in dementia, premature death. We need to keep these cells healthy. And what they were able to identify in these laboratory models is that transplanting young bone marrow into old mice rejuvenated the brain of the older animal. And what they looked at specifically were these synaptic connections, the connectome that enables our neurons to function as a huge parallel processor. Once these disintegrate, no matter how many neurons we have, we're in really bad shape. And this is the chart that I showed at RAADfest that really impressed people a heck of a lot. And that is the young mouse, as you can see to the far left, it's got branches extending from it. It's like a healthy young tree. It's a vibrant microglial cell. But the old mouse, its microglial cell is shriveled, like, frankly, a shriveled old person. Sarcopenia, osteoporosis, brain function reduced. And they did a study where they took young bone marrow and put it into old mice, and they got a dramatic benefit. But I want to go to the slide next to the right first, because they took old bone marrow and put it into old mice, and they didn't get any benefit at all. And it really shows that old bone marrow is, well, senile. It is not productive. It's not functional. But that slide to the right, the old mouse with young bone marrow transplanted into it, its synaptic connections restored. The microglial cells return to a normal state of health from a structural basis. And some people say, well, that's great. You structurally regenerated the microglial cells. What did you get out of that? Well, what you got is a lot more activity. Because these boxes, the upper left gray box is a young mouse, and those lines running through the box are a measurement of its activity level. And then the old mouse, of course, does not have the same level of activity. But the bottom right red box, the old mouse with young bone marrow, wow, lots of activity. In other words, they restored microglial structure, and the mouse responded by behaving like a young mouse again. So this is an incredible study, and it should help to validate what we've talked about at this church many, many times, along with medical doctors coming in, talking about ways they plan to do this. Restore young bone marrow into our old bodies, we may systemically grow biologically younger. It's an incredible technology. Now, there's a lot of media attention about people undergoing young plasma transfers. And from what we've been able to gather, and we've done a lot of research in this area, this is not effective. If you're going to get plasma as old as age 35 and call that young and put it in your body, you're not going to get the benefit that you're looking for. And it's good that some people did some research, so we know we need to do something a lot more. We need to look at exosomes, and we need to look at very, very young plasma constituents if we're going to see regenerative effects occurring. Now, Johnson & Johnson's putting big money into this because they feel if they can develop some way to emulate those animal studies, that they're going to find a drug to treat Alzheimer's disease. So this is great news. They're putting money into Stanford, and Stanford last year showed that if you put just young serum into an older mouse, you'll get some reversals of brain aging. And that 12 to 15-month-old serum, that's kind of like a middle-aged mouse. In other words, it's not really very young, but even that serum induced some reversals of brain aging. But then they did something very unique. They took serum from very young mice, very young mouse serum, and there was a systemic rejuvenation of neurological structure and function. They were able to reverse aging with very young serum. And to put this into context, you see the mouse to the right, well, that's a 12 to 15-month-old mouse. It sure doesn't look very young to me. The one to the left does. That's a 15-day-old mouse. And that's the kind of serum that we want to have put into our bodies. But before we go out and start thinking where we're going to find these young people to get their serum, we don't have to worry about that, because they were able to identify specific proteins in young serum, very young serum, responsible for the rejuvenating effect in these older mice. That was thrombospondin 4, spark-like protein 1, and the great news is they can make that through recombinant technology, meaning they can make it cheap in a laboratory, hopefully sell it to the whole world, and we can all grow younger from a neurological standpoint with these two proteins that are present in very young serum but disappear as we grow older. If we can just synthesize them fast and inexpensively, we'll all be able to have significant regenerations. Now, we've lost a lot of people to a fall and a fracture, and then they're laid up for months, and they develop sepsis, and, well, they die. It's a terrible thing with older people. We develop frailty. It's a major, major problem, and when we suffer falls, we just don't get back up again like a young person. If we develop a fracture, sometimes 50% of certain population groups, they don't survive a fall. They fracture a hip or some other bone, and they die a slow, agonizing death. Study came out showing that putting stem cells into the area where the fracture is was able to accelerate the healing time. This is very important for all of us here, because we're all vulnerable to suffering a fracture. And if we have to lay in a hospital bed for 3 months for it to heal, we may never get out of that hospital bed. So it looks like if you do suffer a fracture, you might want to call up some of these stem cell doctors to see if they can do some localized stem cell infusions where the fracture occurred. You might be able to accelerate healing, so maybe you get out of bed in 3 weeks instead of 3 months. We don't know that yet, but at least this animal study provides a basis to utilize some of the stem cell therapies that are out there right now. Now, stem cells are a hot topic, and they are because, well, stem cells produce progenitor cells that then produce healthy functional cells throughout our tissues. This is what we want to see happen. And the progenitor cell, it's capable of self-renewal, which is important, and also differentiation into a functional cell. We need to do both, by the way, if we're going to maintain a healthy pool of progenitor cells. And it turns out that a lot of what you are all doing every day to maintain your health, it's also boosting the health of your existing pool of stem cells. And we do maintain stem cells as we grow older. They just simply age the same way our other cells do. But by boosting AMPK, which most of you are doing with metformin or calorie restriction, suppressing mTORC1, rapamycin does that directly, but boosting AMPK indirectly suppresses excess mTORC1. Replenishing our NAD levels, we're doing that with different B vitamins, and activating sirtuin proteins with resveratrol, we're already helping to activate our existing pool of stem cells. Very good news that we have this unified theory, because it supports what we've been talking about now for 4 or 5 years at this church, a stair-step approach to biological age control. But I have to remind people about this harsh reality. We're stuck here in 2019, I'm afraid, and if we're age 65, we typically have at least one major issue, at least one, and if we're going to seek that house of optimal health, well, level 1, we need to be able to control what we've known for almost 100 years causes us to die. Our blood pressure, our glycemic markers, our homocysteine levels, we need to correct those, and that's easy to do, but do that before we're moving on to level 2. And I've had too many people tell me they've spent a whole lot of money at a stem cell clinic, not sure if anything even worked for them, and I'm asking them, well, what were your baseline markers? And so often they would say I never had any. Never even checked to see where I was beforehand, and here I went and spent a lot of money, and I'm not sure if anything worked. So level 1, get that in order so that you can achieve that house of optimal health. And again, the stair-step approach that we believe is the most rational way to stay alive now to benefit from technology tomorrow. Now, the data on senolytic therapy keeps getting stronger. Senolytics are compounds that selectively remove senescent cells. And why do we want to do that? Well, senescent cells impede healthy organ function. They create inflammatory conditions systemically that go on all the time, and they emit these protein-degrading enzymes that literally eat away at healthy cells in their vicinity. We don't want to have these senescent cells retained in our body, and the great news is we can remove them with senolytics. And this photo has been in the media quite a few times. It shows a normal age mouse with all the type of health problems that normal age people have. And then the mouse treated with senolytics in midlife, well, it didn't develop those kind of problems at the same rate, and it lived up to 35% longer. And this is just one of many, many studies. But what came out earlier this year was the fact that if we remove senescent cells from our body, we probably reduce our risk of developing cancer. And if we have cancer, removing those senescent cells is going to reduce the inflammatory burden, and that's going to improve our odds of beating that cancer. So the senolytics, in addition to maybe reversing aging in a major way, may also protect us against cancer. And as it relates to the 8 million Americans suffering from congestive heart failure, the official statistics are about 5.4 million. Real numbers are much higher. Turns out if you remove senescent cells from the aging heart of a heart failure type of an animal, well, it gets better. It gets better. Those senescent cells are keeping heart muscles from rejuvenating. And remember, you need progenitor cells to produce fresh, functional cells. And if you get those progenitor cells activated, you're going to have a healthy heart. And this is what was so impressive, one of the more impressive studies of 2019. They took aged people over 70, who had underlying cardiovascular disease. And it turns out that about half of their progenitor cells were senescent. And not only were these senescent cells causing problems, but they were also inhibiting the ability of stem cells and progenitor cells to regenerate the heart muscle. And when they were able to treat people with senolytics, they're seeing some really interesting benefits. And if you know anyone out there with congestive heart failure, they may want to follow our senolytic protocol. It may very well help them do very well. Now, T. Boone Pickens, very famous in the investment community, he represents a philosophy a lot of older people have that I've run into for the last 42 consecutive years that I've been doing this. He felt pretty good at age 88.
and he joked about the fact, look how old I am, and I don't have any serious illnesses. And he felt immortal. He felt that way, but he wasn't. 1 year later, he suffered a bunch of strokes and a fall, and he died at age 91. We shouldn't take the health that we have today for granted as if we're going to continue having it, because it doesn't last. And we know that. That's why we're so dedicated to finding a way to reverse aging. So the major announcement that I made at RAADfest, I'm going to get some water right now, but this is something unprecedented in the history of the human race. And you know, you can read about a breakthrough. You can read about it, or you can be there. And I'm the kind of person, I want to be there. I would have been there at Kitty Hawk in 1903 to see that plane take off for the first time in history. That's where I would have liked to have gone, and I was able to do that in Las Vegas at RAADfest. We changed the world forever, forever. We launched a clinical study called Vitality in Aging. This is the most ambitious human study in the history of civilization. And our challenge was, well, look, $50 million, 5 years.
We don't have $50 million, and most of us in this room really shouldn't expect that they have 5 years to go. T. Boone Pickens thought he did, and he's like a lot of people. So we needed to do a study fast. We needed to demonstrate statistically meaningful age reversal in a 12-month period of time. So this is what we did at RAADfest, and I had no idea how excited the group would get. I just said, I'm going to put this presentation on, and we'll see what happens. Vitality in Aging is the name of the studies that we're going to be funding. The first is the longitudinal study, and it's modeled after the Framingham study. There's no long-term upper threshold limit. We are intending to keep people alive for indefinite periods of time, and it's open to everybody. There's no exclusion criteria. And for those who don't know about Framingham, it's how we identified vascular risk factors. Hypertension. I think everyone knows now if you have high blood pressure, your risk for a heart attack or stroke is greater. But before Framingham, they didn't know. They really didn't know if high blood pressure was a risk factor for heart disease. And the same with blood lipids and other markers of atherogenic risk. They just didn't know. But Framingham identified what causes aging arteries to clog up and what people could do to not have that happen to them. And you hear at this church, we talk a lot about risk factors. If you're a diabetic, where you then have all kinds of risks for problems. And I mean, diabetes is a risk factor for vascular disorders. And there's been over 3,000 papers coming out of the Framingham data. So what we're doing to emulate Framingham is our Vitality in Aging longitudinal study is to identify those risk factors that are causing you to age as an individual. So we're providing at heavily subsidized pricing. We've got laboratories around the country providing us with laboratory tests at extremely low prices. The interventions, again, heavily subsidized. We actually had an offer to donate the dasatinib to everyone who enrolled in this study at RAADfest. It's incredible the number of people who are stepping forward and saying, I'm going to contribute anything I can to make this work. The idea was to get people enrolled in this study so we could figure out where they were health-wise so that we could get them into a study that would eventually enable us to, well, cure aging. That's our objective. Now, we need about $800,000 a year to do this research. At RAADfest, we had only raised about $395,000. And something interesting happened. I got a text from a rather generous and well-to-do individual. He didn't like the idea that we'd only raised $395,000, and he wired us over $200,000. So we could say we've raised over $600,000, and since then we've raised more money. Donations have come in to fund this research, because at this stage I've been funding all the research on my own, and I don't mind doing that, but I don't have a bottomless pocket. And the doctors, they're donating their time, other people are donating their time, and we set up a new charity to fund this research called the Human Age Reversal Project. And we currently have about $615,000 in an interest-bearing account. We haven't spent any of the money. We're hoping to raise about $1 million by the end of this year to help fund what will be the most ambitious project in history. And I reminded the group at RAADfest that I tried to raise money a lot of different ways in the past. I raised as much as $1.2 million, never got up to the $10 million minimum threshold, and we refunded all that money. All that money went back because we couldn't create a commercial entity to do what we wanted to do. But the charitable route, that seems to be working for us. So what we announced at RAADfest was the availability, if you wanted to enroll, to get $4,000 worth of medical exams, diagnostic tests, a whole lot of ways to measure your rate of aging. It would cost you over $4,000 at a doctor's office. You could get it for $595 at RAADfest. We had a team of 6 doctors working in a medical clinic we set up right at the facility, and we were drawing blood. We were doing all kinds of tests to measure people's biological rate of age. We were absolutely swamped with people at that booth. We couldn't handle it all. We got 260 people signed up. A couple hundred more will sign up afterwards. But these were some of the blood panel tests that we're doing, including measuring NAD levels. Commercial labs would charge over $3,000. But because we're getting all these subsidized lab prices, we were able to offer that for the $595 price. And this also includes this whole package that we offered at RAADfest, and we'll offer it here in South Florida once we catch up, by the way, from the RAADfest crowd. We're still processing blood and applications and data, but this wristband, it measures something called heart rate variability, and it's a rather new term, but if you have low heart rate variability, your risk of having a heart attack or stroke might be 40% higher. And the only way to know this really is to either go to a cardiologist office a lot or wear a wristband that will tell you what your heart rate variability is. And if you have low heart rate variability, it's not just heart attack, your risk of stroke is significantly higher. And this is important for all of you in one way or another because we're testing our blood to identify vascular disease risk factors. But if we have low heart rate variability, we're not able to measure that through a test of the blood. And we don't want to have something like this happen to any of the study subjects that we enroll. We don't want to hear someone had a sudden death heart attack when we could have picked it up early. So that's why we have that wristband that we supply to everyone who enrolled in the study. And Harvard also endorses this as a way to measure your risk of having a sudden death, heart attack, or a stroke. So this wristband was included in that package for $595, and this is kind of a summary of what people were offered, and we were oversubscribed, to say the least. We had lines of people at our booth at RAADfest, and we could only process about 250, 260 of them, and the others we're going to process when we catch up. We were primarily volunteers, by the way. No one's getting paid any kind of big money to do this, and people like me, it's, of course, I'm donating my time and my money. The doctors donating their time, their medical staff, some of their own supplies. It's just amazing. And a hidden potential benefit to this, and I'm hoping to be able to extend this in South Florida, is that if we get this study up and running and other people realize that we're a very unique group of people, we're taking all these interventions already to delay our rate of aging, we may get funding so that all future interventions and tests cost nothing. We might be able to get our blood tests, our medications, our interventions for nothing simply by participating in this ongoing study that has no upper threshold for how long we intend to enable people to live. So this is how we enrolled people, basically right there at Rad City. That's the exhibition area for the RAADfest conference. And people were able to get their baseline blood tests done, their diagnostic panels. Then we said, once you get your results back, we're going to advise what you can do to improve your longevity. And if you then achieve a certain milestone that we created, then you qualify for something much more impressive. It's called the Vitality and Aging's Interventions Trial. Interventions is another word for therapies. These are what we plan to incorporate in a trial that lasts 12 months to reverse aging in a group of 50 people. And the objective, as I said, statistically significant and meaningful age reversal in 12 months. This is what we're seeking to do by incorporating the metformin, the rapamycin, the dasatinib, the biologics such as exosomes, NAD restoration. So we feel this study will cost about $530,000, and the only reason we can do it so inexpensively is the doctors are donating their time. They're donating their medical practice space, donating supplies, personnel. It's just remarkable how many people come together. So we've already raised enough money through donations to fund this interventions trial. And we're going to sign up 50 people over the next 3 months and aggressively intervene to implement
implement everything that we talked about here in this church since 2013. We're going to see if it really works in people. So to enroll in the interventions trial, you first have to join the longitudinal study so we can see if you meet the inclusion criteria. Most of us don't, by the way. Most of us are not healthy enough to induce a meaningful reversal of aging, at least by our standards, in that 12-month period. But if you do qualify for the interventions trial, you're going to get over $10,000 worth of tests and therapies for nothing. It'll all come from the charity, the Human Age Reversal Project charity. So this incentivized a lot of people to join the longitudinal study because they're going to find out what may be causing them to age prematurely, and then they may qualify for participation in this study. And again, step one, if you want to participate in this, you can't do it here, by the way, but at RAADfest we had the doctors all set and ready to go. And no one expected this, by the way. They did not expect that they were going to be able to have a medical exam and have all these tests, including a bioimpedance test of their visceral fat mass, their muscle mass. We checked these people over very, very carefully to identify where they were today to see if they qualify for that interventions trial. So the interventions shouldn't surprise any of you. We're going to target calorie restriction pathways. We're going to reduce and resolve inflammation. Those are two different aspects of trying to defeat that aspect of aging. Lengthen telomeres if we can, remove senescent cells, and then restore youthful DNA methylation patterns. That is what we're going to do to enable people to hopefully grow younger over a 12-month period. This is a chart similar to what I just showed you of all the different age reversal interventions that we're going to provide to this group of 50 people. And it won't cost them anything. It's all coming from charitable contributions, both money and the time of the medical doctors, where they're giving up sometimes 20% or more of their practice for age reversal research. So the interventions trial, open label, we will never ever have a placebo group in any study I'm involved in. We know what aging does. There's only one outcome if you do nothing, and that is you drop dead. So we're not going to give people placebos and just watch them drop dead, because we know that will happen anyway. So this is going to be 50 people aged 50 to 75. So you can already see that some of you don't qualify. And the recruitment period started at RAADfest, October 3rd. We hope to conclude it December 15th. And these are our very, very aggressive timelines. We're trying to get this done within a 12 to 15 month period of time so that we can validate if these therapies, when used in combination, can enable people to reverse their rate of biological aging. If we can do anything near what happened with the fruit flies, and they just used 3 interventions, the dasatinib analog, the lithium, that's a low-cost nutrient, and rapamycin, which has now been validated to be safe at 5 milligrams a week. If we can validate that kind of age reversal, then we're going to open up the world to what is truly a revolution in medicine. So these calorie restriction mimetics, and to give you an idea why it's so important, if I could just convince everyone in this room who's not already practicing calorie restriction to eat just 12% less, just 12% less. That seems simple to me. For other people, it's impossible. But you get about 1.5 years of age reversal occurring if you just cut down on your calorie intake. It's probably one of the more important aspects of what you should be doing. So based on that study, we put together a list of drugs that can mimic the effects of calorie restriction. So on the left are the targets, and on the right are the medications that we want people to ingest over this 12-month period to see if we can at least mimic the beneficial effects of reducing one's calorie intake. We want to, of course, increase AMPK. That's what metformin does, and certain nutrients also do that. We want to induce autophagy, that's cleaning out the garbage that accumulates inside our older cells, boost sirtuin expression, restore NAD back to youthful levels. Of course, decrease excess mTOR, insulin, IGF-1. This is the calorie restriction pathways that we're targeting, and metformin is going to be a major, major factor. And by the way, if you haven't seen it in the news, I just saw it 2 days ago, the metformin clinical trial that we've been talking about for years at this church, it received funding, $75 million. The study's going to go on at the Albert Einstein School of Medicine. Dr. Barzelli, he's been out promoting, begging for money, and he's raised it. And from what I read in a news article, and I'm going to talk next month at the church about this, an individual wrote a $40 million check to get that study up off the ground. It's incredible, a $40 million check to see if metformin by itself will meaningfully slow or reverse aging. And we've been recommending metformin since 1995. Our data indicates it's going to work. That's why we're leapfrogging that. We're putting metformin at the base and then advocating for, well, senolytics, then rapamycin, then NAD, and then exosomes therapies. We want to go way beyond what they're doing, but metformin, it truly is a foundation drug to slow aging and reduce your risk of degenerative illness. So we're going to boost AMPK with metformin and a salicylate compound, and we're going to inhibit mTOR with rapamycin, and hopefully reduce some of that belly fat, because that's dangerous fat. It's really hard to get rid of that fat. Rapamycin indicated efficacy in that area in our clinical study, which was limited by those California wildfires. Nonetheless, people did lose belly fat when they took rapamycin. Sirtuins, we want to increase their expression. We're going to use pterostilbene to do that. We're going to boost NAD blood levels with nicotinamide riboside and or NAD infusions or patches. We're going to restore the NAD-NADH ratio, very important, with a polyphenol called beta-lapitone. And we're going to turn up autophagy, very, very important. We need to clear the cellular debris that accumulates inside our aging cells. So again, this is a chart of the calorie restriction targets and the interventions that we're going to use to induce the benefits that have been seen over and over again with CR type technology. Senolytics, the selective removal of senescent cells, absolutely essential. So we have a senolytic cocktail, not just the dasatinib and quercetin, but also fisetin. That's a polyphenol that is in strawberries and other fruits, but it's just tiny amounts of it. So we're going to have a concentrated dose of fisetin, quercetin, dasatinib, and purge the bodies of people in the interventions trial of their senescent cell burden. We want to suppress inflammation. As we know, inflammation causes cancer, vascular disease, dementia. Inflammation is a huge, huge problem. We not only want to suppress it, we want to restore health to previously inflamed tissues. So high-dose fish oil to boost the omega-3 index over 10%, and then return the inflamed tissues to healthy function with a new group of fatty acids called resolvins. This is all part of the interventions trial that we're going to be providing at no cost to the 50 people who qualify for it. We're going to attempt to elongate telomeres, and there is a study showing that if you eat good, exercise, take lots and lots of omega-3 fats, you can lengthen your telomeres. We're hoping to see before and after lengthening. We don't know. That's why we're doing the study, to see if it works. And of course, restore youthful DNA methylation. Very, very important. This is an important way to both measure biological aging and also see if you're really improving the state of your health. If you improve your methylation pattern, you're going to see some meaningful changes to your overall health. And we feel that the metformin, rapamycin, and some of the other compounds in our interventions trial are going to improve the effect. So these are the biomarker tests for aging that people in the interventions trial are going to be getting for free. As you can see, we've got Johns Hopkins. They're virtually donating these tests to us at a subsidized price. They're going to lose money at it. They don't care. They realize we're trying to reverse aging. That's unprecedented. It's never been done before. We're doing it in a way that involves many, many different compounds, and that's what makes it so different than almost anything you've ever seen before. So we've got UCLA, we've got some other universities that are providing us access to experimental tests, including testing for NAD and its various metabolites. So these people in the interventions trial, we're going to be very carefully measuring where they are at baseline and where they all are during that 12-month period. So again, if you qualify for this interventions trial, you pay nothing. It's all subsidized by a charitable entity. And I sometimes understate, I prefer to rather than overstate, but the value probably is over $30,000 if we include the exosomes and some other therapies that we hope to be able to utilize in the people over a 12-month period who are in the interventions trial. So this is the inclusion criteria. And I'll leave that slide up here for a little bit. Most of us don't qualify, including me. I have some issues that don't put me into this category. But we need people who are in rather good state of health between the ages of 50 and 75. And if you're not in a good state of health coming into the study, we just can't afford to bring you in. If we had 5 years and $50 million, we could bring in everybody. But we have a limited budget, and we need to demonstrate results fast. If we demonstrate meaningful age reversal in 12 months, lots and lots of other people are going to jump in, as they're doing now. And the greatest enemy that we all have, and I've been doing this professionally since 1977, so many people feel like they're doing pretty good today, and they procrastinate. They don't get their blood checked as often as they should. They don't even check their blood pressure as often as they should. And they wind up dying. And this is a real major problem. So on the RAAD stage, I was the keynote speaker on Thursday night. We had about 1,000 people in the audience. I had no idea if it was going to be 50 people that wanted to enroll in the study or 100. It turns out we were stampeded. The lines of people outside the little clinic we set up in a hotel, we were totally overwhelmed. Steve, here in the audience, he volunteered the whole time, working 18-hour days. Neil was drafted, our officiator here. He was there taking in enrollments for people, taking in data. My two children, Chance and Chase, and a number of other volunteers who saw we were overwhelmed, and they just said, look, I don't need to do anything other than help you guys get the study up off the ground. So it was really a rewarding weekend to see so many people pitching in, contributing wherever they could for the ultimate objective. So again, we've been able to raise just this year over $600,000. I'm going to try to get that up to $1 million by the end of the year. None of the money has been spent, by the way. I've taken the expenses for all of this have come out of my pocket because I feel it's such an important way to prove to the world that aging is a reversible phenomenon. And if we are able to prove that, and we already have other people doing that using other interventions, we're going to change the world. So this is the charity that we established to do only one thing. It doesn't do research on animals. It doesn't do any other type of charitable activity except attempt to make old people grow biologically younger. That's the only purpose of it. So these, again, were the overview as to how to enroll in these studies. We will have study sites in South Florida very, very soon. At this point, the limited staff that we have are busy processing all the people who enrolled at RAADfest, and then they're going to Phoenix, I think, next week and enrolling another 100 people. We're hoping to get to over 1,000 people within the next 3 to 4 months. These are some of the doctors that will be participating with us. These doctors, by the way, were at RAADfest, some of them donating their time for 3 straight days where they just never stopped doing medical exams and getting people qualified. Doctors would come down at their own expense. They paid their own expenses to come down to volunteer to help during this remarkable period of time. Again, these are the interventions that we intend to implement one after another and then measure how each intervention works to see how young we can enable people to grow. You look at these multiple ways that we feel aging can be reversed in older people. They've all demonstrated efficacy in the animal model. Our proof of concept human trials, they are all working when it comes to what you're seeing up there. What doesn't work, by the way, you don't see it up there. So we're looking forward to seeing a lot of progress occur. And if we make it to year 2030, that's a long ways off for a lot of us. If we make it, well, we're going to merge into the cloud by 2050. And in between 2030 and 2050, we think most of us can stay alive. And this is the kind of technology that, unfortunately, some people who could have made it happen sooner missed out. I always show the list of billionaires who had all the money in the world and didn't donate it properly. Sometimes they wrote a lot of checks to charities, but they didn't specify targeted areas. And instead of trying to find a cure for lymphoma, they just give general checks to universities, and they don't get the results they're looking for. The idea people this old, this young I should say, with all that money wind up dying because they don't want to spend the money in areas that could keep them alive seems rather absurd to me. I don't mind at all spending money on something that could keep humanity living a lot longer. But these individuals, they missed a boat. And T. Boone Pickens, he was an outrageously generous philanthropist. Just didn't put the money in the right way. I mean, if you go to Oklahoma State University, his name's on a football stadium. He's funded most of the $260 million for a football stadium. And that's a nice thing to do. been a lot nicer, though, to put just a couple million into some age reversal research. T. Boone Pickens could have been alive to enjoy seeing the fruits of his donation working, and people would live a lot longer. But this is a problem that I run into with a lot of people. They write money to institutions and not to scientists who are targeting a way to enable people to live a lot longer. So to conclude, 10 years ago, literally, we were doomed. It was very frustrating at the Manhattan Beach Summit, where we brought together Aubrey de Grey, a number of scientists, to try to figure out what could we do to reverse aging. And after that 3-day summit, we came up with nothing to do that we could implement in 2009 to reverse our rate of aging. And here we move forward just 1 decade, and we're initiating a clinical study that aims to induce statistically significant and meaningful age reversal in a group of people over a 12-month period. And we already have confirmatory studies from other groups. I opened up this presentation with the findings from the study with metformin, DHEA, and growth hormone reversing aging 2.5 years. Well, it's already happened. We're going to try to make it work better. In fact, people in that interventions trial, we'll probably put them on growth hormone after the first year just to regenerate their thymus gland and restore a lot of immune competence. And the MIT people, they developed a way to perhaps make this a reality in our lifetime. Nano robots traveling around the body, repairing tissues, restoring them back to youthful functionality. We have a fantastic future ahead of us if we can stay alive, and that's what my objectives are. So the Vitality and Aging Longitudinal Study, we'll be talking about this in the church. We right now are oversubscribed. Too many people wanting to get enrolled and not enough people to enroll them, but we're rapidly bringing in more volunteers, and we're getting new donations coming in, which is good. That means we can start maybe paying people to do this work that we've relied on volunteers so much for. And I just want to give a little tribute to an individual who helped us out so much in the early years, CEO of a major New York Stock Exchange corporation, and he did a lot of the things right, but he wasn't around for these age reversal interventions. And I hadn't heard from him in a couple of years, so I just typed in his name on Google, and I find out that he's dead at age 99. It's really regrettable, because he would have engaged in these experimental age reversal interventions had they been available. But when he was growing older, they just weren't. And he, as a result, is no longer around. So, Justin, you did us a lot of favors, but unfortunately, he's not benefiting, and I don't want to lose anybody in his congregation. So if there's a way we can enable ourselves to avoid an unnecessary premature death, we ought to jump on it. So that's pretty much the conclusion of my talk, and what I'll do now is answer any questions that the group has. Yes, John.
It's not Derek Pearson. Anyway, they've been short of actually enrolling in the study, which was subscribed, with the exact protocols used in the study, the congregation be privy to those?
Yeah, let me clarify that. It's a very good question. What John asked is the protocols that we're using in those 50 people where we're going to attempt to reverse their aging process. It's open source. There's no secrets here. Okay. Everything we're doing is open source. There's no business to doing what we're doing, you understand. These are non-patented compounds. Metformin's a generic, rapamycin, all these compounds, you can buy them around the world for very small amounts of money. What we're seeking to do simply is validate, if we put them together in a combination, are we going to make people grow younger? And so if you don't qualify for the interventions trial, and we can only afford to take 50 people in right now, you'll have access to the exact protocol that we're giving to all of those people. You just have to pay for it. But the good news is that drugs like metformin, well, here in Florida, you can walk into Publix and they'll give you a free month's supply of metformin just for walking in their door. And these other drugs like rapamycin in other countries are just very inexpensive. So what we're going to be doing for these people who are in the interventions trial, that will be available to everybody. The interventions people just get it for free. That's a difference. And if you join the longitudinal study and you want to have Johns Hopkins Hopkins measure your telomere length, you'll get the subsidized price. There's all kind of benefits to enrolling in this longitudinal study. So if you don't qualify, you can still participate. You just have to do it on your own. In other words, you have to pay for a doctor's visit and then buy some of your medications, but they don't cost a lot of money, and then pay for whatever test you're able to afford.
Is 50 people enough to give the study credibility in the world of science?
Yes, it is. 50 people is enough to give this study credibility, because we're going to take people who are relatively healthy to begin with. Actually, they're going to be extraordinarily healthy for between ages of 50 and 75. So the senile factors, that level 1 of that house of optimal health, that's going to be optimized already before they even start. So we're going to be doing DNA methylation measuring tests. We're going to be measuring telomere length. We're going to be doing all of these measurements in a very precise way, and then aggressively utilizing the interventions. So we've already got this approved by an institutional review board, and we will be able to ascertain in a 12-month period 50 people start out at baseline, and where are they at the end? Are they older? Are they younger? How much younger? It will be credible. In fact, this study showing the growth hormone, metformin, DHEA, reversed aging 2.5 years, it was only 9 men. And you wished it was more, but again, there's financial limitations. And we contributed $60,000, by the way, to that study. And I think, wow, $60,000, what a benefit. 2.5 years of age reversal demonstrated. And the reversals were consistent, by the way. And so if we see consistency among these 50 people, I'd like to think that will be accepted. But bear in mind, this is just the launching pad. Once we demonstrate age reversal, hopefully hundreds and thousands of other people will say, this is where the money is. I'm going to take their protocol and enhance it, add different types of exosomes, do something to make the protocols work even better, and eventually result in human biological immortality. Well, for the interventions trial, there'll be the first you join the longitudinal study. Then we already have your baseline. And then you come in for a doctor's appointment, and they start prescribing you medications. And then it's really, the protocol outlines that very carefully. It's a very meticulous, but in general, I think once a month for most people would be, so 12, 15 visits. We have Dr. Gaines is in Boca, and we've got a number of other doctors here in South Florida who have expressed an interest to literally donate their time to get people into the longitudinal study, and then for people who want to pay for that doctor, then they can do that, or they can go to another doctor. But we've got lots of doctors who want to get involved, want to donate their time. It's just a matter of how many volunteers do I have to go out and train the doctors. And that's a little bit of a roadblock right now, which we think we'll overcome in the next 3 or 4 months. So 12 to 15 visits over a 1-year period. Yes, John? Well, it started October 3rd as far as enrolling people. We're hoping to get everyone enrolled by the end of December. And then we start the study in January 2020, if everything goes according to plan. But what's interesting is you're asking about the protocol for the senolytics. The current gold standard is a drug called dasatinib and nutrient quercetin. You do that twice. Week 1, you dose it. Week 2, you dose it. Maybe wait about 9 months, then repeat it. But what they want to do is add fisetin, because that has potent senolytic properties, and they're going to be using a massive dose of fisetin because it's not particularly bioavailable. So in our institutional review board protocol, which is 23,000 words long, this is like a book. This is what these volunteers did. No pay whatsoever. They put together a book on why they're doing this, and they ran it by a group of doctors to get approval. You can't do human research without an IRB approval. And it's meticulously documented as to why they feel each one of these compounds and the dose that they're suggesting may induce significant age reversal. There's been so much published data on metformin. The question is meticulous studies on metformin, and they're never as meticulous as we want. But what they can do is look at groups of diabetics who are using metformin, and they see that their rate of cancers, specifically pancreatic cancer, MD Anderson showed 62% reduced incidences of pancreatic cancer in type 2 diabetics using metformin. The study that's going to be done at the Albert Einstein School of Medicine for $75 million, that will do what you're asking for, a very detailed analysis of metformin by itself. But what we have to go on now are, well, several thousand published studies about metformin. You go to PubMed and just type in metformin and aging, and you can stay up for the next 3 days reading all the data. But nothing as specific as what you're looking for in one study. But after that, it's called TAME, by the way, that study, the $75 million one. When that study concludes, we'll have that data for you. We've observed in people who undergo NAD infusion therapy, if they have tremors, Parkinson's-like tremors, it seems like 50% of them, tremors go away. There's a lot of evidence that you need, of course, DNA repair if you're going to maintain healthy neuronal function. And when NAD levels drop to near zero, you're not going to have any NAD repair. So we believe anyone who has a chronic neurological condition should consider NAD infusion therapy. It's being offered now in doctors' offices throughout the country. The price is about 1/3 of what it used to cost. We believe people with dementia or concerns about dementia, boosting NAD through infusions, not so much injections, but you go and sit in a doctor's chair for 4 or 5 hours and they slowly drip the NAD into your body, and that then boosts NAD throughout your body, and then you supplement with a B vitamin after that to maintain the levels. So yeah, you want to utilize NAD and these other therapies to maintain cognitive proficiency. Exosomes are the secretory factors from stem cells. Healthy young stem cells secrete beneficial exosomes that then nourish the functional cells in our body. There's a number of companies offering exosome therapy. Prices are sometimes outrageous. In other cases, they're not so outrageous. We are evaluating every one of these companies to identify which ones have the best exosomes, which ones are selling them at the most reasonable price. And one of the reasons for doing this study is to be able to use some of these exosomes and see how well they work. We may use a company's exosomes for a couple months, test it before and after, and then maybe go with someone else's exosomes and see which one works better. It's kind of a wild west out there with a lot of companies making exosomes, and we don't know for sure at this time which ones are the best. That's the reason why we're doing the study, to find out what works and what doesn't. Well, what they do is they have stem cells that are dividing in a laboratory vat. And as those stem cells divide, they secrete with these paracrine factors known as exosomes. And these essentially are rejuvenating properties or rejuvenating factors. They're the reason why stem cells are such an attractive option for trying to treat aging or cure it, in that stem cells release these beneficial factors that rejuvenates older cells. Well, stem cells are expensive and they're not necessarily going to work that well just being put into your body. But if you get stem cell exosomes put into your body, you're getting the benefits of stem cells without taking any risk of having systemic stem cells put into your entire body. You're getting all kind of potential benefits, and so far we haven't seen any side effects.
Did the NAD infusion drip work with essential tremors?
Well, I don't know. We have people coming in with tremors. Some of them are Parkinson's, some of them are not. And about half of them, they go through maybe 4 to 6 NAD infusion therapies. And for some of them, their tremors just disappear. This is what we're observing. We haven't done a study to control in a way that we'd really know for sure. But this is something that doesn't just happen on its own. And we never thought it would work. In other words, people came in with this problem. They didn't expect the NAD would resolve that problem. But when people give us that anecdotal feedback, it lets me at least give you anecdotal feedback that we seem to see some efficacy. And the more money we get in,
the more controlled studies we can do to better validate how well NAD may be to treat Parkinson's. But I tell anyone with a neurological disorder, go to one of these many doctors around the country and get some NAD infusions. You might get a benefit. Even if it doesn't resolve your neurological problem, you'll get a lot of other health benefits from it. Okay, group, I'll be around. One more.
I was kind of waiting for the end because my question is a little outside the norm because everyone so far has been talking about supplementation of pharmaceutical approaches for curing the disease of aging. For myself, Jesse from Johns Hopkins reached out to me. I'll be starting in spring my master's in biotechnology. And so that's my area of genetic engineering. And I know a lot of breakthrough stuff has been done at like the Salk Research Institute. From your knowledge, unfortunately that's a different area. When do you see some of that being available to us? Because I know it's one thing to do it with mice. It's another thing to bring it to the genetics into humans. Do you see that in the future that we could actually, instead of taking supplementation or pharmaceutical approach, we could actually use, like we do in the lab, reverse transcription to actually maybe permanently cure some of these issues that we have?
Well, absolutely. Our objective is to live long enough to avail ourselves to exactly what you're talking about, some very advanced, what I'd like to think, gene editing approaches, the CRISPR-Cas9. Dr. George Church at Harvard, who may, by the way, sign on as a co-author of our interventions trial. We met with the Harvard people. They were very excited about it. And our objective is to live long enough so that we can gain access to CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology. And if we do, by the way, we may never need to take another supplement, hormone, or anything else, because our cells will do what it's programmed to do, what we want our cells to do to remain in a healthy state. So yes, that is our ultimate objective. It's their stiff approach to get there, though. Yeah. Okay, group, I look forward to having dinner with you tonight.
Thank you. A couple of announcements. I'd like to let you know, many of you didn't make it to the RAADfest, but they have the videos available. So if you'd like to get your video from RAADfest, you can get that now. It's available. Next month, November the 21st, Thursday evening, we'll be here, and Duncan Ross will be here to talk about exosomes. It's going to be an amazing presentation. Don't miss it next month, November the 21st. And let's see. Oh, one more thing. Let me check with Bill about something. Bill is going to make his PowerPoint available. We're going to have it on our website. Doug is going to put it up there as soon as possible. So the PowerPoint you saw tonight can be seen, and you'll be able to access it at our website in the next day or two. So be sure to check that out and share it with your friends. So we have a wonderful meal tonight. Join us for dinner downstairs, and we'll see you next month.